Welcome, mortals, to the Parallax Podcast. Can you blame the devil for murder? Tonight, we're diving into the real-life story behind The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, and putting demonic possession on trial.
Hi, Willow.
Hi, Karisa. You know, it's been so long since I last saw you. I feel like I forgot what you looked like.
It's been 5 hours.
I know. I haven't seen you in forever.
Like, it's been 5 hours. Literally 5 ever.
I love my eyelashes, by the way.
Oh, they look so pretty. I can
They're
see
so
them on
nice.
the screen.
I know, they're so
Fluttering.
nice. You know, shout out to your client who I met today. I won't say her name because I don't know if she wants to shout out, but shout out to her anyway, because it was kind of cool. Not that we're like super big podcasters yet or anything, but it was cool meeting somebody and them being like, I love your voice. And I was like, oh, I sometimes like my voice too.
You're funny. So you're very rare. You're a rare breed then, because most people don't like to hear their own voice.
Okay, when I say I sometimes like my voice, I very specifically mean I like the voice I use for our intros.
Yes, I
And
would agree.
That's it. I like that. So that's an okay part of my voice. And then after that, I'm like,
It's fine.
it's like hit or miss. It's okay.
All right. So it feels like our topic has moved on to the devil in this episode, and we just kind of talked about Satanism and satanic panic in the last episode with the David Berkowitz stuff that we recorded.
Yeah. Escalating very quickly here.
Yeah. We've moved on to now late 70s, early 80s. We're now past the Berkowitz stuff, and we're now moving into the satanic panic and the devil possession stuff happening and all the exorcisms that are going on. Yeah.
Ooh, yes. Yep. So this is going to be fun. I honestly, the funny thing is, I knew about this case because I had, before we started this podcast, and I was just browsing Netflix for the next like true crime creepy thing I was going to watch while like folding laundry. I saw the whole Devil Made Me Do It. And, you know, here's the thing. I don't watch horror movies. I hate The Conjuring. I'm so sorry to Conjuring fans, but I hate it. I can't do paranormal horror at all. So I've never seen it. I've never seen any of them. And I will never see it. I will never see any of them.
Where I have watched them multiple times.
And see, I honestly didn't even actually know there was a The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. I didn't know it was a thing. And then I saw this documentary. I started watching it, and I thought it was fascinating. And then when Karisa and I were sitting there like, oh, what's our next episode going to be? And I was like, well, I guess we could dive into possession because we've been talking about doing an episode about possession for a while. And then she was like, well, can you find a true crime case with possession in it? And I was like, Karisa, girl, can I find a case?
Can I deliver?
You're so silly.
You did.
I got you.
And here we are. So you're going to open and kind of give us a little background. I'm going to intervene a few times, give my little opinions about some thoughts and some prayers. And then
Correct.
And then we'll talk about the culture of exorcism and possessions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited.
I think we're going to have a really good conversation about this because there's multiple different perspectives on this case alone.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a fun one. I'm excited.
It's definitely not cut or dry.
No. All right. Are you ready?
Yep. I'm prepared.
Okay. So February 16th, 1981, in the small town of Brookfield, Connecticut, 19-year-old Arne Cheyenne Johnson is having a meal with his landlord and friend, 40-year-old Alan Bono. With him is his fiancée, David Glatzel, and his sisters. During the course of this meal, they each have a few glasses of wine, according to Johnson. I think he said 3, actually. And he began to notice that Bono was becoming a little inebriated. Nothing too crazy, but he described Bono as just becoming a little bit more boisterous. And Johnson didn't really want his younger sisters to be around that behavior, so he told Debbie that it was about time for them to head out. They began to walk down the stairs of the apartment to leave, and that's the last thing that Johnson remembers. The next time his memory resumes, he's on a bench in a police station being processed by Detective Glenn Cooper, who tells him that he has just stabbed and killed his friend Bono. But Johnson had no memory of the murder and was just shocked and confused about why he was there. He had no prior criminal history or even any history of violence. However, there was one thing that he and the Glatzel family did know and claimed quite vehemently, that Johnson was innocent by way of demonic possession. Now, how did this happen, and how are they able to claim this with such confidence? This is a very odd defense and is in fact the first and so far only defense in the United States court system of demonic possession. So,
But is it though?
It is.
They didn't even let him use it.
Well, okay, it was the first time
Someone
in
tried
recorded
to
history
use it.
that it has been that someone tried to use it as a defense.
Right.
So
Go for it. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. You're right, though. To understand the events of the first murder in Brookfield's 193-year history and the consequent historical defense, we have to go back about 8 or 9 months before the killing. So Arnie and Debbie had become engaged and had just found a new home in Newtown for them to rent, so the entire family came along with him to help them move in and do some cleaning to prepare the house. Debbie had given each of her brothers a chore to do and gave her youngest brother, David, a broom and sent him into the master bedroom to do some cleaning while she worked on the rest of the house. Not too long after starting the work, David came running out of the house, clearly upset and wanting to leave that very moment. He didn't tell anyone why, but they could tell that something was wrong, so they called it quits for the day and headed back to the family home. At dinner that night, the family could tell that David was still disturbed by something that had happened, and they were finally able to convince him to tell him what was bothering them. He reported that he had a bad feeling about the house that Debbie and Arnie were going to move into as soon as they had pulled up. But what had affected him had happened while he was alone in the master bedroom. He could feel a presence in there, and then he was suddenly pushed backward onto the bed. He saw a figure of an old man standing over him with eyes as black as coal. He described this image as someone dressed up in a typical devil Halloween costume, exactly as you'd expect the devil to look. The man spoke to him, saying that David needed to beware because the man wanted his soul and would come for him. At first, the family didn't believe him. They dismissed his claims as those of an imaginative child and told him to get some rest. That night, however, David got a weird feeling. He then saw an image of something coming closer to the house, something watching him. He thought he could see a figure outside, standing across from his bedroom window, but when he looked again, the figure was gone. And this was just the beginning of David's sleepless nights. The more he told his family of the things he was seeing and experiencing, the more worried his mother Judy became. She ended up calling Catholic priest Father Dennis to come out to the house and bless it. He did so, bringing holy water, holy oil, and incense, and blessed every room in the house, and they thought that was it. That was all they needed to do. But at 3 a.m. that night, the witching hour.
We always know, 3 a.m., nothing good happens.
Exactly. David awoke screaming, "He's coming for me. He's going to punish me." For about 30 to 40 seconds, the entire house rumbled. Lights flashed, glass flew and broke in different rooms as David continued to scream, "He's here," before all went still. Now the family is terrified. The story goes, according to the family, it was a next-door neighbor who recommended that they seek the help of a psychic investigator. At this time as well, Ed and Lorraine Warren had become internationally famous with their book and film, The Amityville Horror. So anybody who is familiar with the Conjuring films, you guys already know exactly who we're about to talk about. Judy called the Warrens asking if they could help with whatever was happening with her son. Ed brought along with him a doctor, only referred to as Dr. Tony, to examine David before they looked into the possibility of the supernatural. The doctor reported that David was in good health both physically and mentally at the time, which I'm going to go ahead and pause here and say that I don't know how much stock I'm going to put in this doctor, because this child is clearly disturbed by what is happening to him, so I don't think he's in good mental health right now. But
so you have to realize, though, mental health was still in its infancy.
That's true.
Understanding back then. So when a doctor is examining this child, you're looking for physical signs. You're looking for untypical things that should be unhealthy. Is their eyes darkened? Do they look like they've lost weight? Do they look like they're exhausted? Or there's fatigue in their eyes with the redness? signs like that versus mental could be just literally something that is verbal that this doctor may not be personally experiencing.
Yeah.
So I
Instead of
understand that
asking the right questions.
if the Warrens are bringing a medical doctor, they're checking off that he's medically okay, not mentally, medically in a physical sense, not a mental capacity, not like a psychiatrist or something.
And apparently the doctor had said that he was quote unquote mentally okay, but like you said, talking about how mental health was in its infancy. Yeah. And I would agree with the fact that this doctor obviously was not a psychiatrist, so probably wouldn't really know all, like, the correct questions to ask and the correct things to do for a full mental health screening. But they decided, okay, well, if this doctor says that David is healthy, then maybe there is something supernatural going on here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and also say, too, because I'm going to refer to this a few times as I'm going through and telling this story. In the documentary, they play several recordings from the family and the Warrens of everything that happens. The Warrens apparently liked to record everything. And so we have several recordings of the Warrens' first conversation with the Glatzel family, as well as recordings afterwards of what's going on with David. And in one of these first recordings made with all the family and the Warrens together, Ed Warren asks David some leading questions, I thought, such as, "You don't want this to go on, do you?" Which did make me wonder a little bit if it was just, it could just be how he asked the question, so it could mean nothing, or it almost sounded as if it was like a person scolding a child in case they're acting out. Like maybe he's trying to incite to see if it could be like a true behavioral issue, or if there was possibly some more like manipulation or coaching behavior. I don't know. It was just something I noticed and kind of wanted to, say for the sake of looking at this with different perspectives. Either way, Ed then stated that they needed to provoke the entity so they could prove that it was real. So he said, "If you have power, knock on the table 3 times. Alan, David's middle brother, stated that the knocks that followed sounded as if someone was taking a sledgehammer to the kitchen floor. He reported that the entire kitchen began to shake and the lights flickered. Ed asked David, "Does this frighten you?" Who wouldn't be frightened by that? But anyway.
But if you're thinking someone has a demon inside them, you would assume that it would not create fear.
Maybe if he's already possessed, it wouldn't respond with a "yes, I'm frightened by this." That's true.
Are you provoking David or you're provoking the demon?
Yeah. Some of these questions that this man asked, I was like, buddy. Anywho, I have my own thoughts about the Warrens we'll get into a little bit later. But anywho, so he asks David.
I have opinions. We have thoughts. We have questions.
We're going to have so much fun with this one. Anyway, so Ed asks David, "Does this frighten you?" And David responded, "I'm afraid because he wants to hurt me. We're all going to be punished for this." During this time, Lorraine had started to walk around the house. She came up behind Ed and whispered to him, "There's a large dark mass standing next to that little boy. It's evil." The Warrens proceeded to tell the family right away that they had a demonic presence in the house. Ed said to the family that the demon would start to take control of David and warned them about what to look for and what possession would look like, with David and the rest of the kids there. So the entire family is still there while they're having this conversation. They had told the family to contact the church, but Judy stated that they had already done that and had the house blessed. The Warrens then instructed the family to begin to record what happened so they would have evidence to give to the church to request an exorcism. At this point in the documentary, Arnie is there and he's telling the story from his side, and he stated that he was still trying to deny that it was real. And he even said in the documentary that to him, these things only happened in cartoons and movies. It wasn't something that happened in real life. Nevertheless, the family went out and bought tape recorders, a Polaroid camera, and a video camera to record what was happening in the house. And not too long after this, David started acting weird, according to his brothers and Arnie. Nobody in the house was sleeping well, as they were all taking shifts to watch David. In the documentary, again, like I said, they played recordings from the family, and these were pretty disturbing. However, one thing that I personally noticed was how terrified the family members sounded in the recording. Of course, David sounded interesting in his own right while he was having these episodes, but the family members sounded absolutely like horrified at what was happening in front of them. And some of them, he's screaming and fighting, and you can hear the commotion and the chaos unfolding. Alan and Arnie also reported that David would act as if he was fighting something, and he would make these choking sounds and hold his hands above him as if he were trying to pull someone else's hands off of his neck, but there was nothing there. Alan also stated that it was truly mentally draining for the entire family to go through this. David himself says that the only thing he remembers is being choked. He doesn't remember anything else that he did or said. As David became progressively more violent, the family began to sleep in shifts so that David wouldn't ever be alone. The Glatzel family was reciting prayers constantly, and Debbie, again Arnie's fiance, said that the entire family felt as if they were getting attacked. Alan stated that their father wasn't really supporting their mother, Judy, as he thought that there was a mental health issue rather than a spiritual issue. He worked 2 jobs and progressively isolated himself as things got worse. There was one point where Alan mentioned that his father had started to believe what was happening, but by then it was too late. They were too far into it. And I think this means that by the time he believed there was something going on, David was already very violent and deep in what they believed to be his possession. Judy called the Warrens again, and Ed told them that David was fully and completely possessed and told them that he wasn't conscious when these behaviors were occurring. So immediately Judy panics, and in hearing that, Ed says, okay, you need to go ahead and get an exorcism. Still, it was going to take a lot to get an exorcism. However, with all the evidence that the Warrens had and that the family collected, the Glatzels were able to get help from the Catholic Church. And a cardinal showed on September 2nd, 1980, and gave the authorization.
The Warrens were here for this, correct?
Yes. By this point, they're here. Which is something that you and I had talked about. There's some varying reports on some of the details, especially like some of the timelines and fine details of this story. I think because it was very sensationalized, and I'll get a little bit more into that later because there's a specific point that I'm going to talk about. But most of what I'm talking about comes from the Glatzel family members themselves in the documentary, right. And then what else I could kind of find from different articles that aligned with what they were saying. But at this point, from everything I could tell, the Warrens are there almost all the time with this family. So they're there to meet this cardinal on September 2nd, 1980. And they get the authorization to move forward with their minor exorcism. I don't know the difference between a minor and major, but I imagine that Karissa is going to tell us here in a little bit.
There is a difference,
so,
yes.
Yes, I am interested. But we're going to find that out in a little bit, so keep that in your guys' minds. So, the Glatzels are invited to go to St. Joseph's Church in Brookfield, Connecticut. Father, he had an interesting last name. And it sounded like Virgil. It started with the V, and I apologize to this priest for the fact that I have pronounced his name incorrectly. But
just call him Father.
Father V performed this exorcism, and he reportedly stated that they could be so intense that they could cause death, which if you weren't scared enough walking into a church for an exorcism, you're probably scared out of your pants now. Alan said that the exorcism actually started very similarly to a mass, and all David remembers is them saying prayers and then nothing else after that. Arnie said that the room became cold, and Alan stated that they knew something was wrong almost immediately. David began hissing and growling, screaming and jerking, and they had to pin him down. Multiple family members had to hold him down. Arnie kept telling David that Jesus loved him and kept saying that David was God's child and the demon couldn't hurt God's child. Arnie even placed a crucifix on David's forehead, and Alan claimed that it began to sizzle. At one point, David's tongue swelled up so much that he couldn't breathe and he started turning blue. It was then that Arnie yelled, "Leave this little kid alone. Take me on. I'm here. Take me on." Arnie stated that he felt the room go cold and still again, and that the Warrens seemed afraid, warning him that he never should have said that. However, that was the end of the exorcism of David. Gradually, life for him began to return back to normal, and he started to become a somewhat happy kid again. The family thought maybe it was over. Perhaps they were finally free, they had done their exorcism, and they were good to go. However, very soon after this exorcism, Detective Glenn Cooper stated that the Warrens actually came to the police station to introduce themselves. The authorities at the time were aware that something strange was happening at the Glatzel residence because they had been getting noise complaints, but they weren't aware of the specifics of the situation. Lorraine Warren, though, made a point to warn the police that she foresaw violence, injury, or death with a knife resulting from the problem with the Glatzel family. The authorities didn't take this claim seriously at the time, but she was right. Debbie Glatzel ended up taking a job at a boarding and grooming facility in Brookfield shortly after life began to return to normal for the Glatzels, and she and Alan Johnson moved into an apartment owned by her boss, 40-year-old Alan Bono. Debbie stated in an interview that the apartment came with a job, so it was a good setup for the two of them just starting out. She and Arnie both indicated that they became good friends with Bono the longer that they stayed there. The morning of February 16th, 1981, Arne Johnson woke up feeling a bit under the weather. He and Debbie were supposed to pick up his sisters that day, though, so he brushed it off and continued on to go pick them up for the weekend they were supposed to spend together. After this, they went to have dinner with Bono, and that is where Arnie stabbed Bono 4 times with a pocket knife. Reports were that there was some kind of argument that broke out between the two that escalated to a physical altercation that ended 15 feet from the front door of the apartment building where Bono was stabbed. Debbie Glatzel would report also to the police when they arrived on scene that Arnie had taken off into the woods, and she was sure he was heading to the family home, which was just down the road. At the Glatzel residence, Judy, the Glatzel father, and the oldest brother Carl were piling into the car to head to the kennels after receiving a hysterical call from Debbie. David panicked, moving a bureau in front of the door with the help of his brother Alan. According to David, he had been the one to answer the phone call from Debbie initially, and he immediately saw a vision of a dead man. He told Alan that the beast possessed Arnie and then saw a vision of Arnie coming towards his house. He was convinced that if Arnie got to the house, he was going to kill both David and his brother. The ambulance that was returning from taking Bono to the hospital, however, spotted Arnie stumbling along the road and reported the sighting to the authorities. Shortly after, they were able to catch up to Arnie and take him into custody. Detective Cooper reported that Arnie seemed disheveled, and when told that he had just stabbed and killed his friend, he just seemed completely confused. Arnie's attorney went to the Warrens and had them give him all of the recordings and pictures and videos of the possession of David. So he was pretty well convinced that there was something going on here. So with that proof, as well as citations from 3 cases in England that had successfully used demonic possession as a defense, they thought they could prove Arnie's innocence. However, Judge Callahan didn't allow that defense to be used, as he stated that it couldn't be founded in science or physical evidence, so that demonic possession couldn't be proven by fact in a court of law, which I have thoughts about that too, and I'll get to them in just a second. But the defense then had no choice but to settle for arguing self-defense so they could get a conviction of second-degree murder instead of first-degree murder, which worked out okay for Arnie, as on November 4th, 1981, the jury did find him guilty of second-degree murder. Judge Callahan stated, "I have no alternative but to give you the maximum sentence allowed," and sentenced Arnie to 10 to 20 years in a maximum security prison.
I thought it was manslaughter he was convicted of. Oh, was it? Okay. I thought it was like they had 2. I thought they had 2 on there, and he was not guilty for the murder, but guilty of manslaughter.
So this is actually something interesting that I've learned in listening to my true crime cases. In some states, manslaughter and second-degree murder are not necessarily the same, but like their sentences are the same, and yeah, they're kind of interchangeable. So like first degree murder is like the premeditated, you have planned it, you have intent to, Whereas usually second degree murder is more so like the crime of passion, where it just all of a sudden you're going to go and do it. And then manslaughter is more of the accidental, you cause someone to die, but you didn't have intent to do so.
Which I always think that manslaughter sounds way more aggressive.
I know. I feel like
the sound of slaughtering someone versus murder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, wow, you just slaughtered someone. That just sounds like you did way more aggressive.
You did a lot more than just like stabbing somebody. Like you really, really went at it. Which I agree. For the longest time before I got into true crime, whenever I heard manslaughter, I just thought it was the same thing as murder. And it was just a different fun way of saying murder. And I
only know from watching Law and Order all these years. There's a distinct difference.
Yeah. I learned that from my true crime podcast, because there are some states where they don't even have manslaughter. They just have first or second degree. And second degree is like where manslaughter falls under, which I don't know. I kind of understand, but at the same time, there are situations where somebody dies and the person who unfortunately caused the death of that person didn't have the intent to go and kill someone. It's just a freak accident or them, not paying attention in a car type situation.
Yeah. So,
but anywho.
Real quickly, while you're talking about this, because I know in the one of the documentaries, The Devil on Trial, that's on Netflix, because Netflix has a couple, but The Devil on Trial is the one specifically about this case outside of the movie itself. But it talks about 3 cases in the UK that use this defense and win. However, I did not find anything that was in prior to 1981 other than one case in 1974. Now, there were some in like the 1800s that those things were brought into it, but they were used as like a mental state of someone and used as, I mean, it actually created a whole like precedent for future cases. But there was only one case that I could find that literally is entangled with the Conjuring, this whole Devil Made Me Do It case. There wasn't anything else that was really connected to it.
And that was another thing I saw, like in the documentary, they said 3. In some of the articles I read where they were talking about how historic this defense was, they said 2. Either way, he had something, for sure, from England where they had successfully used this defense.
Well, no.
Quote unquote.
No. But, so I will add that at the end, because there was, there's a case in this 1974 where, unless I'm like, again, if you guys are listening and you know this case, send it to me, because I looked for this case. I went down the UK rabbit hole and all that stuff. And like, there was only a couple cases that really was shining. And one of them was from 2011.
Interesting. I'm excited to hear more about that. But yeah. And again, like I said, there's a lot of details that are kind of murky from this case. And I do think we're about to get to the point where I talk about it, but I do think it has a whole lot to do with how sensationalized it became. Everybody's just like making up their own extra thing to make the story better, Yeah. So during this entire time of Arnie going on trial and going into prison, Debbie stuck with him through everything. And she eventually did marry him during either his 4th or 5th year in jail. It was towards the end of his time in jail, but she did end up marrying him. And Arnie was ultimately released after 5 years served because of good behavior, and he has never since reoffended. He and Debbie remained married until she passed away in 2021. So I was like, oh, that's kind of sweet. It's like the only part of this that's kind of sweet.
I mean, she truly believed in him.
Yeah. She truly believed in him, and she truly loved him. Now, there is another side to all of this. Carl, the oldest brother, maintains that this was all fabricated. He states that the Glatzels were never this happy family that they were made out to be before all of this. According to him, Judy had never even gone to church before the alleged possession of David, and he watched as the Warrens discussed what a demon could do to David right in front of David. And then David began to act out exactly as they said he would. And he felt as if he was just listening to what the Warrens were saying and taking notes, essentially. He remembers the household being like a show with all the cameras and recording devices that the Warrens and his siblings would use to record David during his episodes. He even recalled a time when David was acting out, calling his mother awful names, and his father walked out of the room. He hit David, and was yelling at him, now I'm telling you to stop, and carrying on. And David, in fact, did stop yelling and cursing and sat down in a corner and was quiet. And Carl's words were, "Glad the devil listens to my dad." Carl also talked about how he and the rest of the family later realized how much the Warrens had taken advantage of his family and their story. They told the family that they would be millionaires if they shared their story, telling David that he would become a very rich little boy because the Warrens were going to write a book about him. And they had an author come out to the house and interview the family and talk about everything that happened to him. But Carl overheard Ed Warren telling the author to make specific details and scenes scarier since fear sells better. Which is why I was saying that's one reason why I think some of the details are murky, not only because the Warrens themselves made, they exaggerated a lot of what happened to this family. But of course, in the previous episode, we talked a lot about sensational journalism and, making the story a lot bigger than it seems. So I think that's something that really happened a lot with this case as well. 6 months later, the Warrens showed up with paperwork for the family to sign and hand over the rights to their story. And in the end, the Glatzels received $4,500, whereas the Warrens made at least $81,000 and then more from the Conjuring franchise. And at the very end of this story, after the death of his parents, Karl Glatzel was in the house going through things and cleaning up. He found several papers and journals. Judy had OCD and would write absolutely everything down. In the journals, he discovered that Judy had allegedly put the drug Sominex into the family's food every night, and that was a medication back in the 80s used to help people sleep, like a sleeping pill almost. And she wouldn't put it in her food. She always had to have like a separate bowl or a separate plate from everybody else and would never take seconds from like the food that people would grab more from. The long-term side effects of this drug are weight gain, hallucinations, and mood swings. So there's definitely a question of, could some of this have come from the Sominex? Of course, David and I think his middle brother as well both claim that this isn't true. They say that their mother would never drug them. Carl says he found the papers where she wrote it down to prove it. I don't know for sure, but that's a whole extra layer added onto this case to really make you wonder.
Yeah. So I have thoughts on Carl. So the thing with Carl, when I was watching the documentary, Carl is a scorned brother that no one talks to anymore. Okay.
Yes.
He only talks about one instance where his dad says anything to David. And we know that his dad was a skeptic in the beginning. We know this. So it's very likely that in the very beginning, his dad did act that way and tell him to stop it. And that was the only time he did that because over time, he probably realized maybe this isn't an act. Okay. Because David sticks to his stories that he was possessed. He's not a positive person about the Warrens, but he doesn't change his story on being possessed.
Yeah.
The other thing with
That's
Carl,
true.
the other thing with Carl, I think he's a skeptic and just all of this in general, period.
Yeah, I got that vibe too, that wasn't a side of the spiritual
malarkey.
world that he believed. Yeah.
Yeah. But the one thing that he's claiming is his mom drugged them. So to refute that, everyone said they took turns watching David and that no one could sleep. So therefore, no one was sleeping because no one was being drugged.
While this was happening. That's
While
very
this was
true.
happening. So she wasn't drugging them. So he only said he saw that one time in the journal, and maybe she started doing that because nobody was sleeping. Like, no one
That
can
could be
sleep.
it.
She's like, my family needs to sleep. I will stay awake and watch David. So maybe that was the one time she wrote that in there.
Yeah.
But did he release anything about what she said about the possessions? What were her thoughts on that? What were you not sharing with us, Carl? You only did the stuff that was negative against your mother and negative against this whole situation to like throw it out the window. So,
and the one thing I will say, since we love playing devil's advocate, of course, it is a documentary. There is a producer and a director behind it. They can choose what they're going to put out there. So there is always a possibility that he said more and they didn't include it. I will say, to your point, most likely she was not drugging them while the situation was going on. However, devil's advocate that I will play is, what if, because it was long-term side effects are the hallucinations, mood swings, yada, yada, yada. She could have stopped as this started happening because she was concerned that her drugging them previously had caused this. And so then she stopped giving them this medication while it's going on. But obviously, if the situation...
She may not have known that at the time because the way that drug was propaganda, like all over, was no, it's not habit forming, there's no side effects.
Yeah,
So
they
at
said
that
it was
time,
so
she would not have been
safe.
aware of the side effects at the time. So I'm not sure if I would buy into the fact that she's like, oh, maybe I should back off. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I'm just saying, when you only present one piece of written work, that could have been
versus
the one
this
night
entire
and it was
documentary.
stating that they slept, the family slept because she gave them their medicine, because they hadn't been sleeping. So there's always the claim that Carl's making it just from one night. If she was that OCD, like, he could have said, I found multiple entries of her doing this.
That's true.
But
he did
didn't
only
say
mention
that.
it once. He
Yes,
did
he
say
only
it was just
mentioned
one spot.
one incident of his mom writing and one incident of his dad doing that. He was actually maybe telling the truth. The problem was he wasn't putting it in the timeline where they existed.
Yep, exactly.
So you're,
It's
again,
true.
leading the
That's
audience
true.
to think it's all out the window.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something that you mentioned, and we know this is something that's a hot topic with the Warrens. So I truly believe, based on their actions, because the Warrens always seem to bring other people in, they weren't trying to keep people to themselves. And we know when you're writing a book, say someone's like, I'm not going to make it that scary. No, you need to make it a little scarier. Make this real. So there's always the opportunity in writing to downplay something, and maybe they wanted you to be like, hey, this is, you weren't here for this, you don't understand how scary this was, make it more scary, this is not enough. He could have been doing that. Okay. Sidebar to this, though. We know prior to this, with the Amityville Horror, which that house was extremely haunted and extremely possessed in itself with anybody that entered it from day one. And so the Warrens didn't go into the Amityville house until after the second family had purchased it and left, after the father figure was starting to have the aggression and stuff after 28 days. They entered the house after the fact. So there was no one living there anymore. Who's to say that the entity didn't affect them somehow? What I'm trying to say is maybe the Warrens themselves, with touching so many items, because they had that museum.
Where they had all the everything, and
They
even
had
the
Annabelle doll. They had so many things. Who's to say
the
that they
attorney
themselves?
who was like, oh yeah, I went in there and they had a doll. I wasn't supposed to touch it. I think its name was
It's a Raggedy Ann doll.
Annabelle. And I was like, how did you not remember its name? It's Annabelle.
Who doesn't know Annabelle?
How did you not know that?
Yeah, right. Get with the program, nerd.
Jeez.
But I'm going to talk about that here in a second when you're finished with everything that you're presenting.
Oh, I'm good. I got all my stuff out.
You're good? Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
I got it all out, girl.
Okay, so then let me just go ahead and we'll get to that point then. Well, there are...
Perfect.
Yeah, there are things that make me think that potentially the Warrens themselves truly had touched something demonic, and there was a part of that was still latched onto them that made them act the way they did. So, I don't know.
Ooh, that's actually a really intriguing point.
Yeah, just because they're trying to help doesn't mean there's not a small entity attached to them that is
Absolutely.
Devious. Yeah. Okay. So the cases where the devil was allowed, like 1974, there was this Michael Taylor man from West Yorkshire, who had became notorious in England due to this seriousness of these events. He was a butcher, and it was this whole story where things got pretty intense. Michael was admitting to feeling some evil inside him, all these things, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to give this entire case. The point is, this case ended tragically. He ended up not long after having an exorcism, he murdered his wife. And so it kind of it was savage. Like, it is off the charts savage. Tore out her eyes, her tongue. He disfigured her face. He strangled his poodle with a violent rage.
Oh
and
my
he was
God,
found,
the poodle.
Yes, found naked and covered in blood and wandering the streets.
Whoa.
I mean, yeah.
Oh my God.
So this is an
Okay.
intense case. Yes, this is an extremely intense case. But this is the only case that I could find that kind of links into the the devil maybe do it in a sense, that
Mm-hmm.
was possessed and had already went through like the exorcism stuff and was found not guilty by reason of insanity. But what this did was set precedent based on the link between dark possession and mental illness and tragedy. So it kind of created a precedence in that right there. But it
And
wasn't
that's why,
like, yeah.
that's why, like, I don't know why they didn't try by reason of insanity for Arnie, because they had more than enough evidence to show that he was part of this family that had been terrified by what's
But
going
was
on.
the plea of mental insanity allowed as precedence by 1981?
Yes. But even in saying that, I don't know if their version of insanity is the same as ours now, given what
you gone
we
mad?
understand and know. Have you gone mad, mate? But like,
We're all mad here.
but like given what we know of mental health now, I don't know if their definition of insanity would be the same, because ours now, you could sit here and give all this evidence and convince a judge that this person actually believed, was in a state in which they truly believed.
Well, that's what they, so in the UK, some of these, there were cases where people used a possession, and what it did was it created a link between the ideology of being possessed and mental health, action. So, committing people to more of an institution type situation. With that said, when you go to court, and I know they were doing this in the 80s, you are to swear on a Bible.
Mm-hmm.
If you're asked to swear on a Bible that talks about God, angels, demons, the devil, all these things, but you're not allowed to use that same Bible, pull the information out of it, and use it as a defense, that doesn't make any sense.
And that leans so much too into the conversation we had on our very first episode about culture and religion tying into a crime, because these people were Catholic. They truly, and I'm not saying this in a sense of it's not real, I'm just, for this specific case, they do believe in angels and demons. These are extremely real to them. They believe in this. So whether or not the judge believes in that, whether or not the prosecution believes in that, you still have to take into account their religious beliefs, because to them, the possession was real.
Correct.
And that is a mental state. And if we're going to take into account the mental state...
And that's where the UK has come along, and they're a little bit more advanced in that combo. And they don't have to mark it as technically possession, but as a mental state in correlation with the belief of possession. Yeah.
See, we need to learn a little bit from them, because I think that's good.
We learned a lot from them. I know we threw their tea in the harbor, but man, what were we thinking?
Like, gosh darn it all, right now.
It seemed to turn out okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so exorcism and demonology. There are varying versions across cultures, of course. We talk about this in previous episodes, where there is that belief in light and dark, good and bad, angels and demons type things. But most cultures, from what I found on the surface from that I've studied, the Asian cultures, a lot of the Islamic and pre-Islamic type stuff, Judaism and like pre-Christian and Christian, they'll use religious relics, they'll use talismans, they'll use separate items and perform rituals and incantations to remove spirits. So when you hear the word exorcism, what faith do you automatically think of? The Catholic Church.
Yeah, I was going to say probably Catholicism.
Yeah, most people think exorcism. They think of priests. They think of The Exorcist. They think of those movies, the sensationalism that is in Hollywood.
Yeah.
But yes. But interestingly enough, exorcism existed thousands of years before the Catholic Church. So,
okay.
Yeah. So this is something, it's just the Catholic Church has made it a formal rite, a formal, like the Roman ritual, like the rites in which a exorcism who is trained rigorously to perform the exorcisms has the rights to. Now, priests, there are certain, again, you talked about like the minor and the major. I'll get to that part.
Yeah.
I will get to that one.
Cool.
But I wanted to kind of give you a little background that exorcisms are not privy only to the Catholic Church, as a lot of Catholics would probably say, just get you a priest. There are other faiths. There are other faiths that believe in removing and getting rid of dark spirits. So ancient Mesopotamia, this is like 1,000 years BC, like before BC.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so in Mesopotamia, like that whole first millennium BC, there's like written evidence where healers were using incantations and rituals to drive evil spirits out. So we're seeing that way back then. We're seeing this in the ancient Egypt culture, where the Egyptians were using these incantations and these invocations to rid themselves of these demonic forces. Then you get into like Judaism and like the Dead Sea Scrolls. And like this is all like the Jewish tradition from the Old Testament stuff.
But that's what those, I'm going to sound awful in saying this. I'm so sorry, you guys. I was not raised in a highly, highly religious household, but I've heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Like I've heard that name. I never knew what they actually were. I just heard the name over and over
Scrolls
again.
that were found in these caves near the Dead Sea. Yeah, I've seen them on tour. It's really cool.
Oh yeah, you told me that. Yeah.
That was
Well, now I know
exciting.
there. Okay.
For a nerd like me that likes religious history. But so
Who
the Dead
can
Sea
see
Scrolls
that and appreciate them too.
Yes, correct. So the Dead Sea Scrolls, they kind of coincide along with the majority of the Jewish faith and traditions as far as what they are telling you. So it's like pre-New Testament type stuff. So the traditions talk about King Solomon. I don't know if you've ever heard of King Solomon. Have you ever heard of King Solomon's temple? The Lost Temple, yeah. Like it's like this grand, great temple that King Solomon built. So King Solomon was said to have the ability to expel demons on command. That he had the ability to use certain like rings or whatever and use these particular rituals to control them. And it's also rumored that he used these same abilities to have demons build said temple. Yes. Which is interesting. Which is interesting because this would all kind of predate the Catholic Church. Okay.
Yeah.
All of the ability to understand how to control demons would be pre-Catholic Church.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So keep that in mind. I think my cat's trying to bust into the door. Like, let her in. Where are you at?
How cat-like.
Yeah.
How cat-like of her.
And then in the New Testament, Jesus casts out spirits several times in the New Testament. You kind of learn about where they want to be as far as like, cast us into these swine. Like there's all kinds of different things that you learn about demonic things throughout the Bible. But let's talk about the Catholic Church as a forefront because we know they're kind of at the forefront when we talk about possession in Western culture.
Yeah.
So over the years, the Catholic faith has created this more formal outline, like I mentioned, this Roman ritual, which this is the way to exorcise demons. And as you had mentioned, like I said, the minor and the major. So a minor exorcism is a simpler and less formalized ritual typically performed with minor spiritual disturbances or like the symptoms are just believed to like be caused by spiritual or evil influences. And these often involve like prayers, blessings, and the application of like religious symbols, like in David's situation with the cross and stuff.
Yeah, the crucifix he put on David's forehead.
Right. So these are usually performed by priests and authorized religious figures within the extensive rites of the church. So that's why I think you can't just have a priest start doing it. They have to have permission. There has to be a certain way that they do this. It's not just like, oh yeah, I'll just come over next week and can we schedule Tuesday
I'll
at 10?
just do this real fast. Yeah, that's what
I got an opening.
I have an opening for you on this Tuesday at 4.
9, but
can you make it then?
Yeah, exactly. Can you show up? Bring your demon with you.
Was it BYOD? Bring your own demon?
BYOD. Bring your own demon. I am going to use that. All right. So a major exorcism, on the other hand, now this is more complex, more formalized, and this official ritual is used to confront more serious cases of possession or demonic influence. Often this will involve more detailed and lengthy processes. This is the Hollywood sensationalized ones where you see them going days and weeks and it's taking forever to get rid of this. It's not as easy. Right. So this is like more outlined procedures with religious texts. Major exorcisms are more extensively trained priests. That's where you get your exorcists and they follow strict protocols.
Wow. Okay. So the exorcists are the ones who are doing the major. Whereas
I don't think they're as readily available.
Yeah,
I don't think they're as readily available as like some of the other priests there are priests that are allowed to do certain functions of blessings and try and whatever, but it's strictly given to the exorcists themselves, the people who are trained to do this.
Wow.
So Yeah. Now the exorcists do minor. I'm not saying they don't do minor. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's a situational thing. That's why it has to be done. Like, what are we looking at case by case?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So basically, in summary, there's just a difference in the complexity, the formal authority, and the severity of the cases and what they're trying to address. This is a severe demon. This is a minor demon. Because even within the demonology part of it, because exorcists are also demonologists, they know the levels of demons. Some people are said to have 1 to a whole legion of demons inside them. Gosh. And the terminology of legion, we hear like if we're thinking Roman times, a legion is like 6,000 men.
Yeah, I was going to say legion is an entire force.
Right. So it's possible someone could have a lot of demons that they're trying to exorcise. So it's not just one, and you're provoking. It's more extensive. So,
girl, I barely have enough room for myself. In my own brain. I'm fitting a bunch of demons in there too.
Well, so here's something really cool. So one of the things that when I was looking up that case, that one that Michael Taylor from Yorkshire in the UK, so he was admittedly feeling like he had evil inside him, and he was saying that he had this thing that needed to be exorcised. The one thing the church says is you do not self-diagnose with being possessed by demons.
Really?
Yeah, you don't self-diagnose.
Like they don't accept it, or they're like warning,
well, it's
don't
usually,
say this.
You usually don't self-diagnose that you are possessed. Like the way that I watched several priests on YouTube from different sects of kind of the Catholic Church that talked about exorcism. And all of them kind of said the same thing. This is not something you self-diagnose. You're not like, yeah, I think I'm possessed. Can you get it out of me? Because you're not going to ask for it to be removed.
Yeah, I Googled it and...
yeah, I went on WebMD and it says possession. It says dial possession. Your local priest. Yeah. Okay. Anyways. So there are 4 characteristics within the Catholic belief of basically confirming whether someone has been possessed. The first one is unnatural physical phenomenon. This is where the person has to exhibit like physical behaviors, manifestations that are not natural to our human health. Okay. Such as like speaking different language. The language was, oh my gosh. Like
tongues. You possess, Karisa?
Such as speaking in different languages that you would not have had the ability to learn. Although now with Duolingo, you can learn anything.
Sponsor us? No.
Check their Duolingo account. Unusual strength or supernatural sounding voices coming from your body. Okay. So that's trait number 1. Trait number 2 is the knowledge of hidden things. So the individual demonstrates knowledge of events, objects, information that they could have no access through normal means, suggesting supernatural awareness. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. Aversion to sacred things, like with David and the cross, like having the cross on there, the holy water, those things that burn the skin. So those types of things show like a strong like dislike of these symbols and these objects on them or around them. Hating certain prayers.
Yeah. Yep. I will say to that, fun fact, I remember talking to you about this and saying, we were talking about rabies of all things. And how people with rabies have hydrophobia, where they act as if they're afraid of water. And that actually they believe that there is a possible link between, having the aversion to holy water and rabies. And that sometimes they thought people who were actually rabid were possessed by demons because they would like freak out when they're touched by the holy water, when in reality they're just rabid.
In the medieval times, that would absolutely make sense.
Yeah. Because nowadays we know better. Right. And nowadays, it's just not as common.
Don't touch the wild animal.
I don't care how cute it is. Leave it be.
Yes, Willow. Leave it by the side of the road.
If you are not trained specifically to pick up that animal, leave it there.
Yes.
Do not put that coyote in your car. It is not a dog. So cute. I found this cute scrawny dog. Does this belong to anyone?
All right. The 4th trait is involuntary physical movements. This is when someone experiences uncontrollable movements, like when they talk about him being able to move his body in ways his body shouldn't be able to bend. Yeah. So then vocalizations that are under their conscious control. So often this is perceived as like a demonic manifestation where like he has his normal voice, but then there's a voice hidden underneath of it. Yeah. So you hear like something else that's not his his voice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that. I think it's usually kind of described like as almost this growl when they talk. Because I've heard those tapes from the documentary, and then I listened to like a long time ago a case. Gosh, I think her name was like it was a German young woman, and I think her name was like is Anne Marie or Anna something, and they had recordings of her as well, and I noticed that the growl that I kind of heard in her voice sounded similar to the growl that I heard in David's, which was an interesting thing to notice.
Yeah. Sorry. So one of the things that I didn't take a deep dive into that I wanted to, but maybe I'll do it in a later episode. But supposedly, and I didn't even know this, I went like a small little thing I saw, and I'm like, I'm not going down this deep rabbit hole for this episode. But supposedly, Pope Francis was in public square, and he put his hands on a child and performs an exorcism like that. I'm like, I need to go down this rabbit hole, and I haven't done it, so I will. But people firmly believe that he did this, and Francis was a firm believer in evil and demons, so in doing exorcisms. Yeah. So I wanted to give you some places. There's some places around the world that have a lot of ties to the devil. And
let's do it.
Yeah. And I talk about this in my book, by the way, which will be available when we go do Boo at the Zoo.
Yeah, go see us.
Yes.
October 11th and 12th.
Yes.
At the Gulf Breeze Zoo.
The Gulf Breeze Zoo. But I do talk about certain locations like the Devil's Triangle. So the Devil's Triangle is a vortex just like the Bermuda Triangle, but it's over in Japan. And there are 12 of these vortices in the entire world that are supposed to be somehow, like dark energy. But, whatever. So Jerusalem, outside the walls, there is a place called the Valley of Hinnom. This is the Hebrew word for hell today. This is what the word that... Yeah, Hinnom is basically the Hebrew word for hell today. Yeah. So in the book of Jeremiah, this is where satanic rituals, this is like the pit of fire, sacrifice of your firstborn son. This is where the Hebrew people were going in, the Israelites were going in, and they were sacrificing their firstborn sons. I know.
No biggie.
In this pit of fire.
Yeah. No biggie.
Yeah, this is where supposedly Satan and his demons, like a lot of, there's a lot of folklore and that comes from this and creating this design of Satan as being the oppressor. But let's see here. There's you've probably seen this one, the Devil's Tower. This is out in Wyoming. It looks like a big tree trunk that's been cut off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Made from volcanic material, but there's no volcanoes nearby.
No biggie.
Interesting.
No big deal.
Yeah. So yeah, and the native people there that worship it's as like a sacred altar that they communicate with the universe right there. So what they believe there's there's a spiritual doorway that they can use to connect to their
wow. So the native people believe that it's a spiritual doorway. Everybody else thinks
we've called it the Devil's Tower
or something. Gosh. Okay.
So have you ever heard of the Jersey Devil?
I have heard of the Jersey Devil.
Yeah, in the Pine Barrens. Yeah, the winged creatures that screeches and roars. Yes. Anyways, so I thought it was very interesting because I felt like we look at the exorcism, we look at the possession stuff from this case, and we completely just see the Catholic Church. So if you don't believe in what the Catholic Church has to say, you completely forget about the devil and possessions. However, they widely exist in other cultures. So possessions, devil, even in the Australian cultures, there are mention of different tricksters and entities that are evil that play a part in the actions and things like that. Every culture has something where evil affects it and how it affects it. But one thing that I wanted to say, because I was like, hold that thought, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Here it is. I wrote it down. So there's a book I talk about, The Witch Craze by Roper. And this shares a superficial insight of the history of the Catholic Church and the version of the devils and the demons. This satanic things that were happening and all these kind of picturesque things of evil didn't have visual stuff until we started building these cathedrals with the gargoyles and all these things on it. Yeah. So as the people entered the churches, they would see this darkness and this evil in the outside world, but all the beauty was in the inside of the church where they were safe. It was very figurative. It was very a lot of imagery created there because people then didn't have Bibles of their own. Yeah. So a lot of stuff was relayed based on the church telling them. Well, when people started to walk away and started to be like trying to find their own salvation outside of what the church was telling them, that's when the persecution came from, you're leaving the church to go find salvation other than what we're saying. So they were hunted down as heretics, which later evolved into the witch hunts.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And in this time, many aspects of the Bible were not made public to the people, including how to control demons. That was reserved for, and only for, the necromancers, who the church allowed these men to summon and control demons. But the women, who were called witches, because they were doing the bidding of the devil, they were witches. But because they weren't in control, the devil was in control of them, vice versa. A necromancer is in control of the demons. So that was how the church saw it and weighed it. Like, oh, but we're controlling them. You, on the other hand, are being controlled by them.
You're being controlled by them. Yeah.
Right. So this is kind of where a lot of the imagery of what the devil looks like came from, was this time frame.
So interesting.
Yeah. And how the devil possesses. Yeah. Oh my gosh. We should definitely do an episode down the road on the witch hunts and like the trials and stuff. We should pick a couple of those, because the fact that's what some of these women went through, and the men who wrote journals about how they tortured women, is insane.
God. I know. I actually have a few family members. I have a few ancestors who were convicted witches in the
let's do their story down the road.
Yes, I'll have to get with my
add it to the docket.
Get some more information about like who they were and stuff. But I mean, I know the Salem witch trials has been covered 100 different times, but I definitely
we just need to give it from your family's perspective.
I was going to say, I think that we can take a different spin on it. I think we can get a little more of a conversation, especially in connection with some of the other witch trials, because there's multiple all throughout the world. So it'd be really interesting to look into all those and kind of tie them together and see some of the cultural aspects between all of them that we can
And I have two books that I would highly recommend. Of course, the Witch Craze one by Roper is top notch.
Yeah.
And I'd have to find what the other one was called. I can't remember. It's a little bit more old world. It's like written like a little, like it's older. So I'd have to find that one. But it's like someone's ethnographic construct of what happened like historically. So it's more just a scholarly thing. But
well,
they're both
now
scholarly.
You guys know at some point we're going to be talking about some witches.
We're going to talk about vampires too. We're going to have an author on.
I know, we're going to have a lot of fun. Yeah,
we have an author who writes fiction about vampires, but we're going to talk about some true stories of people and vampires. And then we're going to let, kind of just talk about vampires, because fun fact, I had a doctor one time. I was like, if you can think of one mythological creature that would truly exist, which one it would be? And she's like, oh, vampires for real. I'm like, really? I'm like, not just like, she's like, no, I think the vampires could exist. I'm like, okay, I need to know about this.
Yeah. I think we could have a good conversation, especially given some of the true stories where the legends and myths of the vampires came from. That'd be really interesting to dive into and then talk about, because I know for a fact you are going to pull some story about some creature from some culture that's just like the vampire, and you're going to say, look at the timeline, it came up at the same time. And I'm going to say, well, don't know how I'm supposed to sleep tonight. Thank you, Karissa.
Well, until then, if you have any stories about vampires, you have stories about true crime, you have stories about possession, or any of the above, you can reach out to us at info@theparallaxpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media, theparallaxpodcast.com, and get to following us, because we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we need some more followers.
You're hilarious. All right, until next time, thank you for listening.
I'm Willow Grace.
I'm Karissa. Bye, mortals.
Bye, mortals.